My name's Jeremy Tomley.
Spike Richards with Saber Bats.
My name is Tasha Messer-Williams.
Benjamin Green.
My name is Seth Voorhees, and I am a modern-day bladesmith.
Whether it's down-home Southern cooking, skilled craftsmanship, or beautiful artwork, Mississippi is full of amazing people and amazing stories. So let them tell you what it means to be made in Mississippi.
My name is Benjamin Green, and I'm the head brewer of Southern Prohibition Brewing. Southern Prohibition is a brewery that was started in 2013 here in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. You know, growing up in Hattiesburg, coming of age, getting ready to start, drinking beer at 21, there just wasn't a lot of options. It was something that was a little bit newer in this part of the country. Other parts of the United States, there's a bustling brewery scene, and I found comfort in local homebrew, essentially. So kind of making friends with people that homebrewed and, shared opinions about craft beer in general, European beer styles, different things like that. I believe in 2012, they raised the ABV cap, and that was mainly in part to a grassroots organization called Raise Your Pints. So they basically championed the initial beer laws to change here in our state. The original ABV cap was 5% ABV, it's now 10.2. So with that 5% ABV cap, it limited the state on not only what they could bring in from other breweries, but breweries here in the state, what they could produce. So if you go and look at anything 5% ABV and lower, you're missing out on tons of different beer styles and flavors. So it was really handcuffing business, essentially, in the state here. So once that law was changed, it was prime time for breweries to start opening, because they could kind of brew a lot of different styles. And at that point, we also, taproom laws were really weird at that point too. We couldn't sell directly to a consumer. Here in Mississippi, we have a 3-tier system, what they refer to. We basically create a product, sell it to a distribution partner. That distribution partner then sells it to bars, restaurants, grocery stores, gas stations, and then they in turn sell it to consumers. So up until 2015, we were not allowed to sell a product that we made in-house, which can be very limiting in how your business can operate. I have a deep-running passion. I could sit here and talk a long time about beer. There's so many different beer styles, so many different techniques, things that fall out of favor, come back. Style-wise, it's just really interesting. I think that I started my journey essentially in different states, places like Florida and Louisiana, and going down there and tasting these crazy beers that had these awesome labels and these weird names, and I didn't know anything about, because like I had mentioned earlier, the 5% cap here in-state really limited us on what we could have and sell and consume. So I would drink all these very flavorful beers, be super excited and stoked about it, come back home, and then I couldn't get it here. So I was constantly either muling beer or just consuming, just really consuming what I could while I was out of state, which brought on the home brewing aspect. So I went up and did a beer course in Wisconsin. Came back down and was getting ready to fill out job applications. At the time, I believe Lazy Magnolia was the only brewery in the state. Southern Prohibition didn't really exist in this form yet. I was good friends with John Nill, the owner of the Keg and Barrel. He had a brew pub license at the time and a little bit of equipment, and was like, hey, why don't you come over here and you can start making some different beers here while you're filling out applications, and we'll just see where it goes. Fast forward a year and a half later, and it just kind of snowballed, and the Southern Prohibition was just kind of thrown in my lap at that point. I got really lucky in that regard, where I was able to kind of get my foot in the door and start making creative decisions pretty much immediately. That's kind of unheard of in the industry. Usually you kind of start at the bottom and work your way up. Beer is basically just a fermented beverage. We're talking about 4 main ingredients traditionally. We're talking about our grains, obviously water, hops, and yeast. So within those 4 different ingredients, there's tons of variations that can happen. So basically the possibilities are endless on the different colors, flavor contributions, all these different styles that you can make just with those 4 ingredients. A hop it's a plant. You can think of it essentially as the essence, the aroma and flavor part of the beer. Now, yeast and grain and your malts, those can play a role in that. When we're talking about hops, when we think of these really popular styles like IPA, the hops are definitely the star of the show. So you can have flavors that range from stuff that is similar to cedar all the way to stuff like pineapple or passion fruit. So tons of different varieties of hops. Hops are naturally antimicrobial, so traditionally people started using hops to extend the shelf life before modern refrigeration and stuff like that. Pretty much anywhere that grows good wine grapes can grow good hops. We're fortunate enough in the day and age we live in where we can get hops from all over the country. So, you know, New Zealand and Australia grow some really fruity, awesome hops. Well, we can place an order and get that shipped to us. A lot of good hops are coming from Yakima in Washington, here in the United States. There's German hops, English hops. Yeah, like I said, pretty much anywhere wine grapes are grown, then hops can grow. When we're starting off with our brewing process here, whether it's a new beer or an old beer, there's basically an order of operations that needs to happen. So essentially we're taking our grain, so we have, you know, wheats and barley and oats and all these different grains. We're getting all our sugars from these grains. So you mainly get your color of your beer, aka dark beers have dark grains, and your beers can have very simple grain bills. They could have 1 malt in it. It could be just 2-row barley. Or there could be 10 different grains in there and you're really layering in these different flavors. Think stuff like Russian Imperial Stouts, really robust dark beers. They're gonna have all kinds of different dark grains in there to bring those flavors out. So essentially we're gonna take all these grains and we're gonna crack them in a mill. The reason why we wanna do that is we're exposing the starchy part of that grain, the inside part. We're gonna mix that with a very specific degree of water depending on the recipe, and that hot water is going to convert the starch to sugar. The reason why this is really important is because later on when we add yeast to that, the yeast eats the sugar, and 2 of the main byproducts of that are ethanol, alcohol, which stays in the beer, and then CO2, which is expelled out the beer during the fermentation process. After we're bringing all this up to a boil, we're adding our hops. Hops are the bittering component of the beer. Pre-hops, like I said, we have a bunch of starch that's now sugar. We essentially have sugar water at this point. Brewers call it wort, W-O-R-T. And using that hop, we're basically cooking at that point. We're balancing out sweetness with bitterness depending on the beer style. Later on, we're gonna add our yeast, like I said, push the beer into a clean, sanitary environment where that yeast can start eating that sugar to create alcohol. Not until that yeast is finished eating the sugar do we actually call it beer. It's wort all the way up until the final product when it's an alcoholic beverage at that point. There's different techniques to achieve different things. Consistency is kind of the name of the game when you're talking about a production brewery. Quality and consistency, those are kind of 2 pillars that we've always relied on here at Southern Prohibition. So there are techniques to kind of help along the way in different processes. You know, we treat lagers very differently than we treat ales. Those are kind of 2 separate things. Yeah, at the end of the day, they're both beer, but they need to ferment at different temperatures. We have water chemistry. There's a lot of nuances that we could get into to kind of differentiate different beer styles that need to be treated differently on the process. But generally speaking, that order of operations is the same throughout. pHs might need to be different, water chemistry might need to be different, temperatures might need to be different, but really we're just talking about that order of operation from taking that cracked grain, bringing it to a boil, adding our hops, pitching our yeast, and putting that beer into the fermenter so it can ferment. That's pretty much the same across the board. So we do a lot of sensory, whether that's in-house. We're actually at the size now and have the purchasing power. I either go out to Yakima in Washington every year to hand pick hops from the farm that they come from, me and my team, which they're awesome. Southern Prohibition wouldn't be anywhere without the people that are back there, like making beer and packaging beer daily. But everybody's involved in that sensory process. Everybody that touches their hand in the beer is back there smelling these hops to make sure that we are making this consistent product. So yeah, there's a lot of sensory involved. I essentially have had multiple notebooks over the years, and I'm just constantly taking inspiration from things that aren't even beer related and jotting them down either in my phone or my notebook for beers. I have tons of names that don't have any kind of recipe with them. I have tons of recipes that don't have a name with them. So when it's time to make something new, we just kind of throw something together. We have a really good staff in the back and in the tap room here. We, the tap room opened up in 2015. At that point, we were using a food truck out back. There was a law that changed last year that said if we put in a brick and mortar kitchen, then we could get a liquor license. So, that was another arm of revenue coming in. I like to drink a cocktail every once in a while, just like everybody does. So I think that it was kind of a no-brainer to put the energy into finding someone who could take our food and elevate it to where we think our beer is. So, everything on this side is going great. This is an awesome space to show people that like to consume alcohol and people who abstained from consuming alcohol that it can be done responsibly. And, it's not all about going out and drinking as much as you can, A lot of our foods pair really well with beer. Moderation's key for anything that you do. Beer is no exception to that. I think that the tap room is one of the most important aspects of our business because we get that customer interaction. Southern Prohibition, we are here because of the community. Hattiesburg's really put their arm around us. Mississippi at large has put their arm around us. We've really strived to become one of Mississippi's breweries, and I think that over the past 10 years we've definitely accomplished that. And I love to come in the tap room and have people give feedback, talk about a memory they had years ago that had to do with our beer, whether it was inside our walls or at their house or at a gathering. It's just awesome to be able to make a product that people can share with other people in their lives. And over the 10 years, there's people that have just kind of grown up with Southern Prohibition. If you started drinking it when you were 20-something, now you're 30-something, and you have a family. And Southern Prohibition's just been that beer's been really a part of your life and at your table and at your parties and when you're sad and when you're happy. And that's just like an awesome thing to be able to share with people.